Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. Today I am doing a review comparison type of video between the DIOR Face and Body Foundation and the Nars Sheer Glow. So recently I did a review of the DIOR Face and Body Glow, this highlighter product. It's really nice. I'll link the review somewhere so you can go check it out. It's beautiful. But anyway, some of you asked me what I thought of the foundation because I mentioned I had that one and how it compared to one of my other favorite foundations, which is the Nars. So I figured I would just do like a quick comparison and a review. The Sheer Glow has obviously been on the market for, I don't know, forever, really long time. So it will be more a review of the DIOR, but these two are kind of surprisingly similar, so I figured a comparison could be useful for some of you. But before we get started, I want to say thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. That is crazy. It is wild what is happening. I love and appreciate every single one of you who have joined my little family here, so thank you so much. And if you're new here, not yet subscribed, consider doing so. It's a great day. Definitely go down and smash that like button. It really helps me out. And with that, we can get started on this review comparison type thing. Let's get started on the video. So I showed you the bottles. This is the DIOR and the Nars one, and I want to just go over like price and things like that. I've written it down on my phone, so if I look down, that's why. The DIOR one is 50 milliliters and the Nars is 30, so that is something to take into consideration. I know this bottle doesn't look like a lot bigger, but that is quite a difference in how much product you get. And the DIOR one is also less expensive. So the DIOR one in respective pricing, I found that it's £29.5. It's $40 US and 35 euros for the DIOR. And the Nars one seems to run at $47 US. Really? That's so expensive. And £33 and 43 euros. So this one is considerably more expensive and it's less product. But speaking of packaging, I really like the Nars one. Obviously it's glass, so don't break it. It's a bit heavy to travel with, but it looks really nice. And once you get the pump, it's obviously very mess free. This one, so I normally just store my foundation bottles like this in my vanity. I haven't traveled with this one at all. This is what the lid looks like. I'll do a close-up so you can see, but it's just so messy. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong because it's not stored in any kind of crazy way. So I don't know if it's just like a fluke, but it's definitely a messy packaging. Every time I take the lid off, there is foundation somewhere else on the outside of the lid, or just it's a bit messy. And I want to mention quickly the ingredients. I know this is kind of the boring stuff. We want to see how they perform differently, but I think it's worth noting that the DIOR has alcohol and fragrance in it. I can definitely smell the fragrance, but I haven't noticed my skin getting dry from the alcohol or anything. But the Nars one does not have any of that. Other than that, they are both like, they have water and silicone. I don't know quite how to describe it. To me, it just smells like perfume. It smells a bit like clean, but not fresh. It definitely, it's definitely feels like fragrance. And the last thing before we get into the performance of these is that they both have 40 shades in the shade range. I have to say the Nars one is probably the most perfect foundation match I have ever had, It's the Light 3 in Gobi. And it has this olive undertone, which I find a lot of foundations don't do when they're really light. I just think that's so good because I do have like some green in my skin and it's so difficult to find a foundation that matches that. The DIOR one is, I got this one is in Zero Warm. For any of you considering whether this is the right shade for you, I'll write down in the description box some of the other foundation matches I have. But I have to say this one is slightly too pale for me, and even now in winter it's a bit pale, so in summer this will definitely not work. But I felt like the one warm was too warm, like it was too yellow, so I went with the Zero and it works, but I would have preferred it to be a little bit warmer. And I think the DIOR range has the warm and cool and neutral, I think, and I looked at the cool range, like Zero Cool, and that seemed to be even lighter and more pink, so definitely wrong for me. But they do go a bit lighter than this one as well. So let's get on to how these actually perform. So the DIOR one is much thinner in texture, not super watery, but definitely a bit runny, whereas the Nars one is a lot more creamy. But I don't feel like the Nars one feels a lot heavier on the skin. They feel quite lightweight, both of them, at least to me. I don't cake anything on. The Dior one might be a little bit lighter, but honestly nothing that I notice a difference in. What I do notice though is that applying these is quite different. Because the Dior one is much thinner, it's easier to get streaking with it, at least that's what I find, and I find that I'm more limited in what I can use to apply it with. So I have found that I use either like this stippling brush, like I use in the demo of the application, or I use my hands, and that's pretty much all I use. Because the Nars one is creamier in texture, I just find that it's much easier to use a wide variety of kind of brushes. I like to use goat hair brushes or the stippling brush or this flat sable brush, and it doesn't streak as easily, whereas if I try to do that with the Dior foundation, it just gets streaky and I can't get it even, and it's just not that nice. So that's one thing I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to applying this foundation, but I realize it has to be this thin if you are going to use it as a body foundation, because you will just put it in your hand or any kind of like application mitt and just drag it along the leg and it will be fast. If you had a thick creamy foundation, that would never work as a body foundation. It's just, it takes so long and it's horrible to work with. So I get that it has to be thin in texture. It's just not my favorite for applying to the face, but for the body, great. I find that I can layer the foundations both a little bit. With the Dior one though, you want to let it set completely, because if you start layering before it has set, you will just get a mess and it will look cakey and awful. I don't layer a ton, but it can be layered a little bit. The Dior one has a lot more coverage than your typical MAC face and body foundation. It's much more similar in coverage to the Nars, but it's a little bit lighter. It's not as, it doesn't cover as much, which you wouldn't expect from a face and body foundation anyways, but I do think that when I use them, so today I have the Dior on this side and the Nars on this side, and I don't notice a huge difference in coverage. They are actually much more similar than I thought they would be. I thought the Dior would be very light in coverage and very glowy, but it's definitely not. It has more coverage and it's actually more matte. It's more matte than the Sheer Glow. So if you've used the Sheer Glow foundation, you know that it has very like a satin glow finish. This one is definitely more matte, but it doesn't look flat either. I think it has a very nice like skin-like texture, but it is matte, and I'm not a huge fan of matte foundations, so I like them to have a little bit more glow. The Sheer Glow foundation is actually kind of as matte as I want to go. I like a lot of glow in my base products. So the Dior one is a little bit too matte for me. And I also have, I bought the primer because I don't know, I just went a little nuts. I want to try all the products. So I bought the primer, and if you have oily skin, these two together is going to be such a nice combination, because this one is matte, this one mattifies even more. I think it's really great if you have oily skin. It really does smooth out the skin and it's very silky and so nice to have on. If you do use it with the foundation, let it sit on the skin a while before you put on foundation. Like I do my skincare, let that soak in. I put this one on and I let it sit for 20 minutes. Just let it sit for a while, because if you go in with the foundation immediately after you have put this on, you will have a mess. It is not nice. I have actually worn this just on its own without any foundation and just like spot concealed under my eyes and my spots and everything, and I think it's really nice in that combination or under a very glowy foundation. So I just wanted to mention that. Moving on, talking about what this video is actually about now. But because the Dior foundation is more matte, it's also a little bit less friendly to textured, like dry textured skin. That's what I have found. I think the Sheer Glow foundation is very good for so many different skin types because it doesn't emphasize dry patches, and this one does that a little bit. Not a ton. Like, I am being very critical of this, but it's not as kind to dry skin as the Sheer Glow is. So I mentioned I did a wear test. It's very informal. I just did like some shots when I first applied the foundation and then when I took it off at night. And I think it was 12 hours between those two shots. I'll put it on the screen. And I ran around all day and I didn't touch up at all. It was raining outside. I was sweating. It's just, it went through a lot that day. And I think both foundations wear quite well. What I like more about the Dior foundation is that this is quite transfer resistant. If you really hate having foundation when you kind of touch your face, you can wear this and it does not transfer. I'll show you close-ups again on my hand of how they differ in transfer, but I never thought of the Sheer Glow foundation as a foundation that would transfer. I've never had like an issue with it, but then I tried the Dior and it doesn't come off on anything, and I've worn it under clothing and it's fine. My skin doesn't like feel sucked dry of any kind of hydration or anything at all. So hopefully you can see in this footage that they wear quite well. Do remember, this is a very long day, and having the foundation not break up more than it has and having it not wear any worse, I think it's really good. So I did this a couple of days ago and I was quite impressed. Right, so I've talked about all the differences between these foundations, but don't get me wrong, I do think they are quite similar. The Dior one is kind of the Sheer Glow foundation for people with more oily skin and people who need a little bit less coverage. I think that's about it. It's a bit more matte, a little less coverage, but they are quite similar in the finish. Dior anything is not going to be free, unfortunately, but it is like 20 ml more and it's less pricey. So I just think maybe it's worth checking out. Anyways, I hope that gives you like a clear picture of the differences between these two, because I know some of you asked, but I would love to hear what you think if you have tried either of these foundations, especially the Dior is the newer release. How do you think it compares to the Sheer Glow? Do you think it is nice? I think it's kind of a good price for a Dior foundation of this size. Obviously, you will go through a lot of it if you use it for the body all the time. When it comes to which foundation I will be repurchasing, it has to be the Sheer Glow. I like the Dior, but I probably won't repurchase it just because the matte finish is just, it's a little bit too matte for me. So I have this kind of very ghostly pale complexion most of the year, and the Nars one is just a perfect match for me. So I love the shade, but also it's so nice and easy to apply. It's just, it glides on, it's just smooth and blendable, and then it's there. I wish it was more transfer resistant like the Dior, but yeah, I think they are similar. I kind of use them a bit interchangeably, but Nars is still my favorite. Anyways, I would love to hear what you think. Hope this was helpful. Don't know what this is. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!